Hello and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today I'm joined by Matthew Carroll and Paul Hoppe as we're discussing ethical questions from WandaVision. All that and more after a commercial break that I have no control over, and I'm sure these commercials have absolutely no significance whatsoever to the larger plot of the story. Welcome back, I'm Matthew, and today I should say I'm Matthew Fox since I'm being joined by Matthew Carroll. Matthew, one of the co-hosts of the MCU cast. They did weekly casts on WandaVision every week that I got to be a part of as a producer and a guest. And I'm so excited, Matt, to have you back on to discuss the ethical questions, because every week there was stuff that we started to get into, and we'd always kind of say, like, okay, well, we need to go into this further in the ethics podcast. So I'm really glad to have you here. How you doing today?
Yeah, man, it's good to be here. Good to be here. I watched WandaVision. I can't say I'm an expert on ethics, but I watched WandaVision, so I'm ready to throw in my 2 cents.
None of us are an expert on anything. That's the whole point of ethics, you know? We get to make it up as we go along. Paul, also good to have you here. How you doing today?
I also watched WandaVision, and I don't really believe in the concept of ethics, but I have a lot of opinions about what people should or shouldn't do, which I guess people call ethics. But it's like less should and more, okay, let's do it.
I want to say that you have very strong feelings about being a contrarian, but then I think you're going to disagree with me, and we're just going to skip that whole thing entirely. So, let's just kind of start out general, just kind of setting the tone for it. What are your guys' overall thoughts on this show?
Well, I think it was really wonderfully put together. Just a solid piece of art on Marvel's part. Really, like... I kept being blown away by the execution of the thing, which has nothing to do with the ethics of it. Just really well done. Like all of the period stuff they did with the different episodes that were set in different time periods of sitcoms were just like tone perfect. Actors were wonderful. The music is maybe the best music Marvel's ever done. And they did so many different genres and so many interesting things with it, from the big sweeping scores that is sort of common to Marvel to things like Agatha All Along and the WandaVision theme song, multiple WandaVision theme songs. I can't say enough good about the thing. Now, there's a lot of controversy going on over, like, did they set up a lot of things that didn't pay off? And I think a lot of that is just fans wanting more than they got. but I am content with what I got. I think it's a wonderful piece of art. I love it.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be discussing it. We're mostly going to be discussing today the ethical questions that, like, the characters themselves face. But there's so much about this show in terms of, like, the relationship between the show and its fans and theory and trolling and all that we're going to get into some questions there as well. Now, Paul, I know you were not quite as positive about this show.
Yeah, I mean, my feelings towards the show aren't, they're not like a lot of feelings for the most part. It's more just like, I really respect that Marvel was like, let's do this high concept series that's gonna take a little while to kind of get going, but you know, there's a lot of trust in the audience involved there. And I really appreciate that they seem to be making a lot of different series that aren't necessarily all aimed at the same people or not aimed at the same kind of feel or rhythm or whatever. I didn't love it. I thought it was a great replication or kind of spoof on, you know, some of those older, like, family sitcoms. I've never really liked family sitcoms that much, so I'm like, right. Well, I kind of wanted them to be funnier, you know? But, you know, just seeing how many people loved it, like, this I'd file in the category of things that, like, didn't really feel like they were totally for me, and I'm totally fine with that. Like, it's clearly caused a lot of joy for a lot of people. Although, you know, regarding all of the payoffs that, like, maybe weren't paid off, I mean, I'll admit there's a little bit of, like, schadenfreude there. Like, in terms of just seeing people, like, so into it and, like, it's Mephisto. No Mephisto. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot there about the trolling and I think the questions there to get into.
And, like, I might be mad if, like, I really wanted the Foxmen, you know, in the MCU, but, like,
right,
maybe they will be, maybe they won't be. I don't know. I kind of would like them to reintroduce mutants in just, like, a totally straight up, like, oh, there's a mutant, you know, here's a backstory of some mutants, like, as opposed to this multiverse crossover. You know, they'll do what they do. In the Netflix series, like, we really got trolled pretty hard on Misty Knight. And I remember talking about that at the time. But then eventually they pay it off. So
right.
I'm kind of expecting something similar where there is some kind of like, you're like, oh, is this it? Is this it? No, this isn't it. Oh, this is it. And maybe that's 2 years later. I don't know. But
yeah, that was the fun for me, is the fact that and I just tried to take it at face value for what it was and enjoy it for what it was. And there were definitely things. I loved the idea of Pietro. See, I've never wanted the Fox X-Men to come into the MCU. Never. Yeah. I think they're sort of bad movies, and there's just so much in there that would sort of water down the MCU. But they did it in such a fun and interesting way in WandaVision. I was like, suddenly on board. I was like, okay, maybe I could deal with this if they just brought in this weird selective characters that are fun from that and made it work with this sort of campy WandaVision thing. And then they teased me with it to the point that got me speculating, and I had a great time speculating about it. And then they didn't do it, and I'm fine with it. Like I still am fine with the fact that the X-Men are not going to be brought over.
Yeah.
And I have to say, for me, there's a very interesting thing that I got to go through of watching the show with you and Jeff every week and being part of all the theory stuff. Because, as I said, I'm not deeply versed in the comic side of it. I probably would not have, I would never have heard the word Mephisto if I hadn't been part of our deep conversations every week. And there's a part of me that started to worry, is this show only going to work for people who really love that deep dive stuff? And one thing I think I've been really interested in is, I then later rewatched it with my partner, who knows none of all that. She wasn't doing any of the theory crafting. She's never heard a lot of these things. And we just binged it one wonderful night, and she loved all of it. And so I do think there's something great about a show that can speak upon those different levels.
It's sort of like shows that appeal to adults and kids, right?
Yeah.
It hits on different levels.
Yeah, exactly.
That feels weird to say. It's like, who's the adults here? I
don't know.
I legitimately don't know in that scenario who's the adult.
Know. Yeah,
the person who obsesses over the stuff, or the person with less knowledge.
Both.
We'll move past that particular question. So let's start right with the heart of it. Wanda. Her character goes on such a great journey from an ethics perspective here, I think. And I'm really curious, where do you guys wind up seeing her? One of the things that we were discussing as the show went on week by week is she the villain? Is she going to become the big bad? And it seems like what the show gave us is that she was at first being kind of this happy-go-lucky thing. She was starting to realize she was doing harm. We were in the audience starting to realize the real pain and trauma that was being caused. And then at the end, there's sort of much worse people who show up, like Hayward, who literally you basically have someone who literally shoots a child, and someone else who literally kills a puppy.
Yep.
We're pretty lampshaded. Here's the actual bad people, and Wanda kind of acknowledges that she does wrong, and she apologizes, and then kind of goes off to do her thing. Where does she wind up for you? Is this about her hero origin story, sort of? Is this about her having been a villain but getting away with it? Is it somewhere in the middle? How do you see Wanda ethically?
I mean, she did really do nothing in this show but bad. She did nothing but cause pain, and the only victory or good that she did was stop causing pain, which is a victory, and it is a step in the right direction ethically. But I wouldn't call her a hero of this story.
Right.
She is someone who learned she was causing pain and stopped causing that pain, which is, there's a lot you could dig into here about today's world, and you can finally seeing pain you're causing and stopping causing that pain, seeing other people as people and seeing the value in their experience. That is incredibly cool that they told the story the way they did. I don't think she's a hero, but I look at all these other characters that you mentioned. Yeah, and I guess you asked about Wanda, so I won't get too deep, but I don't even know I feel like everyone in this story is kind of ethically gray. Even Hayward, Hayward's a dick. But when you think about it, as I just said, Wanda spent the whole season, she did nothing but cause pain. And given her track record and the public experiences that she's had with the problems she's done, she literally was working for Ultron. Then she caused the Lagos incident. Then she caused the whole Civil War experience, fighting, over her to some degree. And then you move forward to now, and she's like kidnapping an entire town. Like, if I were that government agent, I'd probably be against her as well, And sort of Agatha seems like she's only power hungry, but she also is the one who stands up to Wanda and says, like, a friend Jason from the Stranded Panda chat posted yesterday. He's like, I'm pretty sure Agatha's the hero of this story.
From the perspective of the townspeople.
From the perspective of the townspeople. Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah.
Like, a bunch of people were engaging with that, like, as if he was just saying that as a neutral, unqualified statement.
Yeah, sorry. We had our conversations offline about it too, but yes, that's exactly what he said on the thing. From the perspective of the townspeople, like, she's the hero. She steps up forward to Wanda, says, "Look at the people you're causing pain to," and Wanda stops causing that pain. Like, she's the one that actually breaks through to Wanda and says, like, "Look at these people. Stop what you're doing." We're
going to do a whole thing on Agatha, to be sure, because the one thing I'd say back there is that at that point she does. Earlier, like when Vision's trying to convince her, or Monica's trying to convince her, Agatha's the one being like, no, Wanda, this is all fine.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
But you're right, for the end. But just
totally
so Paul, what about for you? Like, where do you see Wanda in all this?
I just wanted to add the one thing. I do have strong feelings about being a contrarian, and two, as much as I wasn't super like into the show, I did watch it literally the minute it came out for 8 weeks in a row. So like, it held a certain level of interest, even if it didn't always, even if it wasn't until week 4 that Darcy and Wu showed up. But they're my favorite. Anyway,
they're really good.
They're great.
Wanda and her journey, like, so, in terms of like doing anything heroic, like, I think at the end when she chooses to release everyone from the predicament she's put them in, to stop torturing people, it comes at great personal cost.
Sure.
And I think that's inherently heroic, even if it's not an action against another person. She, like, in a way of looking at it, like, she offs her family,
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
Again, after having offed Vision in order to, try to save the world. I think, like, if we focus on, like, yeah, okay, she was Sokovian and she joined Ultron, and, like, that's bad. But on the other hand, it's like, if you're Sokovian, like, maybe Ultron seems better than, like, Tony Stark and American hegemony throughout the world.
Absolutely.
Like,
absolutely. I was not, when I mentioned that stuff, I'm saying from Hayward's perspective, right? Like, that's what Hayward knows about her.
Yeah. And it's like, I think whether the extent to which Hayward is a villain comes down to partially what you think about Sword, right? And, we'll get to that. But, like, Wanda, like, she's done some bad things. I think in the series, she's the principal antagonist of the townspeople. The story isn't really told from the perspective of the townspeople, so I think that's easy to kind of overlook or forget. I think her kind of moral culpability and sort of like how good or bad she comes off at the end is somewhat compromised by Agatha and Sword and how we feel about them. And I don't know if we're supposed to kind of feel a certain way. I like the fact that they leave some of that sort of open. I think the puppy killing and shooting at children points pretty strongly, in particular directions. And Agatha, like, she clearly can remove people from the spell. So when she doesn't, it's on her too, right?
Right. I could see a case being made that, like, she didn't do it because first she needed to understand what she was up against. Like, maybe if she'd done it earlier and then she's up against a witch that she can't. Like, this witch is displaying power that she's never understood. So maybe she needed to do a little reconnaissance before doing an all-out attack, as she did at the end.
Right. And I think there's definitely something there. And I do think there's something inconsistent about how Agatha's powers are presented, which is a bit frustrating. But to take it back to Wanda, it's funny. I honestly, going into this, I thought I was going to be the one who was the most like Wanda belongs in jail, because that's kind of how I felt at the end of the first time I watched it. I was like, wait a minute, Wanda has just done this horrifically traumatizing thing, and again, like we talked, Paul, you brought up, and I think I very much agree. when people say things like, okay, this character killed a puppy, this person shot at children, it's kind of the way of the writers being like putting a big flashing like bad person sign above their head.
Or in Hayward's case, he didn't give her a badge. You know what I mean? Like, like there's little things like that made Hayward look like a dick from the very beginning.
Right, exactly. In Wanda's case, they make a very specific point to show us like that children were locked in their rooms for days because of this.
Right.
Which, interestingly enough, I think is, not coincidentally, very much like Wanda being like locked in her room of the like the broken house with the bomb.
Yeah.
So I feel like on the one hand, we're supposed to very much like, and so I ended that first time I watched the show, like, Wanda, take her to jail. She's a straight up villain.
Good luck with that, by the way.
Well, also, there's a problem. Yeah. The more I think about it, the more I start, I have a lot of sympathy for her. I also understand, like, all the different sides of what's happening. More than anything, I think she's a Batman villain. And I'm thinking, like, think about someone like Mr. Freeze or someone else like that where, and the MCU has this to be sure, but Batman, I think, especially does this, where you have a character who has this very sympathetic backstory, and then they do these things where it's not even that they're intending to harm people, it's that they are so focused on getting their love back or doing the thing that they feel like they need to do that they're not paying much attention to the harm that they're causing others.
Right.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What if the story wasn't a Batman movie, but was Mr. Freeze, where eventually he realizes all the harm he's causing and is willing to let go of wanting his wife back because he realizes he's hurting people? Mm-hmm. Like, to me, I kind of think that's kind of the framework in which I see this. Does that make sense?
It does. And, like, when I watch Batman stories, by the way, I feel like Spider-Man villains are the closest thing to that in Marvel a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Or like
Doc Ock and stuff like that, like being very wronged. And
the lizard guy, But, like, yeah, when I'm watching a Batman story, a lot of times at the end, like, when the villain stops doing the villainy stuff, like, I'm good with them just, like, going off and being wherever. Like, it doesn't, I've got a whole thing about prison that we don't have to get too deep into, but it's like, like, what do you do with people who do harm and then voluntarily stop doing the harm? Sure, there's a danger of if somebody establishes a pattern, right, where they'll do harm until you, like, point it out to them, and then they'll stop, and then they'll start doing harm again until you're like, hey, stop it, and they're like, oh, right. That's problematic, and obviously we need to deal with that. But, like, if somebody's doing harm, if they don't have, like, a big pattern of it, and if it's something that they do, and then they deliberately stop doing, depending on kind of where they're at mentally, like, I don't see any particular need for anything else to happen after that. Right. I think you put it really well when, we were having a conversation about this on G-Chat or whatever, and maybe you can, like, rephrase or say what you said. I should have grabbed the quote, but it was something about, like, not needing, like, retribution, basically just needing it to be acknowledged, like, yeah, this was bad. Let's not do that. People shouldn't do that. And, then at some point just moving on. But mostly the kind of emphasis on acknowledging, like, yeah, you shouldn't take a town of people mentally hostage. And, regardless of how you treat them, basically. Just, like, don't do that. Don't mind control a town full of people. Okay, we good? Like, got it? And
I really wish we'd gotten that moment. Really gotten a moment between the townspeople after she'd stopped, where, like, maybe she asks for forgiveness or apologizes or something, and then they're like, no, we don't forget. I wish there'd been, like, because all we got was Monica's response, which was tracked. Monica understood her from the beginning as someone going through grief and wasn't personally. She was personally affected because she was also enslaved in the Hex for a time, but, like, not like these people were. And Monica sort of forgives her and says, says the thing about, they'll never know what you sacrificed. But, like, that's the thing, they will never know. So I wish we'd gotten
let's
that.
Tell them.
We get a lot of ugly looks from those people, and I think we do get the idea that like there is a consequence. These people are never going to like you. These people are always going to mistrust you, and probably they're going to go forth telling their story and continue to, and the world will mistrust you. But like, I just wish we'd had that. I think they were trying to end it on sort of a happy note until that twist at the end where she's using dark magics or whatever.
I think that the happy note is a really good point. I think that's where, I think this is maybe the frustration that I have, and it's why I'm glad we're talking about it, because I do feel like Wanda's story, there is such an ethically rich question here, you know? Like, Paul, what you bring up about the idea of, you know, if you do it once, there doesn't, maybe it's just like, okay, you know, don't do that again, walk away. For Wanda, this is a pattern. I mean, she did join Ultron before. Like, this isn't the first time it's happened for Wanda. There's a story, you know, and then you have of Lagos.
Lagos is this particular one.
I keep hearing it. I keep getting it wrong. Thinking Lagos,
yeah, there's there's like a Lagos in South America and a Lagos in South Africa. Is that right? Nigeria. Sorry, yeah.
Right.
And so that's
I thought that's where it is. Isn't it? It's not the one in Nigeria.
Yes, the Nigeria one is pronounced Lagos. We had a Nigerian listener write in and be like, they say it wrong in the MCU. Cool. The MCU says Lagos, but it's Lagos.
Right, okay.
Good to know.
But yeah, and that one I think, there's a whole debate about if that's her fault or not. But anyway, my point being, I feel like there's so much to ethically question about Wanda and to wrestle with. Like, is she a good guy? Is she a bad guy? Is she a guy?
Is she a guy?
No. Which I also have a thing to say later about Wanda. But I think my frustration about that ending is that I think part of what they do is to say, okay, we have all these ethical questions about Wanda, but wait a minute, Hayward and Agatha are so clearly bad guys.
Yeah.
That now you should have, we're not really wrestling with Wanda anymore, because, you know, it's something I think movies do a lot, or TV shows do a lot of, stop thinking about if this person's a bad person because here's someone who's worse.
Right.
And I think I kind of wish that we hadn't had that, Hayward shooting at the kid, or, Agatha, I feel like the show never quite made up its, and we'll get it to her in a second. I'm just talking about it in terms of how it affects Wanda. But I wish we just had clearer, is Agatha about her own power? Is Agatha about thinking that the Scarlet Witch is just a bad, scary thing and wanting to stop it? Because I feel like it makes Wanda's ending too easy in a way that I think the show could have had it be much more complicated.
I think
was for most of the show. Yeah,
but I think the presence of Agatha and Sword, always kind of undermined Wanda as, the one doing the thing. You know, because we're kind of not certain. I mean, even at the end, I don't think we're certain exactly how much of everything was her. You know, I mean, if you have a theme song like it was Agatha all along, that kind of undermines, but it was Wanda, right? Doing a whole bunch of this stuff.
Yeah, who has actual agency is a very interesting question, I think.
Well, you also have even not just Agatha, but Hayward from the beginning. Apparently, this whole thing was his plan to try to get Vision turned back on, and so he baits her in the little surgical theater into trying to get her to power him up, and that's not that pushes her even further down the spiral, which causes this whole thing. So even there's sort of these origins of the problem in Hayward as well.
Which I will just say, not to keep going back to my pet theory, but how often is it that, you know, it's Lex Luthor or someone else like that who's baiting the person who becomes the Batman villain. You know, I feel like that's often a common theme. And
or, I mean, one thing I've seen in a bunch of places is you get these stories where the hero is the villain or the antagonist, or they're doing something bad, but then secretly it's Brainiac. You know,
right? Mm-hmm. And I hate that. I hate the shadowy cabal was responsible all along. I really am not a fan.
Right?
Yeah, it's let the heroes be bad and let us think about it. I think
for sure. To go also, Paul, to what you were saying about the the conversation we were having about moving away from retribution. I definitely think that. I feel to me, the idea of Wanda did something bad, so she deserves to be punished. I just don't think that studies have shown that doesn't actually help make crime better. Like, it's just dumb. I think, though, that there's a real importance, and Matt, you brought this up, between retribution and restitution. And restitution to me is about, you don't just get to say, oh, I just totally traumatized you and like made a whole bunch of therapists in this town really rich. Sorry, and fly away.
There's a spin-off show. All these people going through therapy. I think that would be great.
But like, the next step should actually be, okay, not only do I recognize the harm I did, how can I now take actions to try and help the harm, to try to bring about healing?
Yeah.
And
she maybe would be perfectly equipped for that.
You mean the person who can do mind magic?
Yeah.
Like, help deal.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I could see that as being a great moment of maybe in the moment she's just like, okay, I'm so sorry. Wait, let me just like mind wipe you all and make it all better. And then the townspeople being like, no, we want to sit with this, but let's like work this out.
Like, this happened. Don't take away our pain. Like, it takes away the, whatever. Yeah. Don't take away our experiences. This is our experience. Kind of thing.
Or some of them might be like, take away my experience. I don't want to remember this shit. And other ones might be like, no, you know what? I want to hold this.
Yeah. There's just so many rabbit holes to go down with this. And like, I want to go down them all. Like, and I wish this had another season, honestly. Like, I really wish, like, I want to know what happens in that town where you've got a bunch of people that are hurt who think of Agatha as a hero, and then you've got Agatha who's been like mind wiped, and do those people want to help Agatha? And like, I want to know. And also, part of this is, I don't know if y'all caught this this little nugget, but the lady's name is Sarah Proctor.
Oh, right.
Who wakes up and talks about her daughter. That is a lady from comics, or not from comics. I'm sorry.
From
that's the lady from the real world, who was in the witch trials, and it's like
and was murdered.
Yes.
Exactly that. Yeah, Sarah Proctor is central to the actual Salem witch trials that this is all based on. I thought that was a great little nod.
Yeah, so like, to me, you've got this Agatha character, and you've got a familiar in that bunny that is clearly not a bunny. It's some sort of dark spirit that it would be there to still help Agatha after she's, I don't know. I'm just like really, really curious what happens in this town full of people that just saw power on a scale they've never seen. They've got a person there named Agatha who could be their mentor. They've got an evil spirit that might be able to help wake Agatha up. And then, what happens? And is that Sarah Proctor Easter egg? And I don't know if we'll ever go back. Like, I could absolutely see them using that, or I could see them dropping this all completely and us never seeing Westview again.
And it's fun that you went in that direction, because I take that same nugget, I take the same just bit about Agnes and go in the opposite direction, which is that I do find it troubling that I'm talking about how Wanda doesn't deserve retribution in any way. But Wanda is clearly 100% in favor of retribution.
Right.
I did nothing wrong. I'm going to be flying off and going to do my own thing, but you, Agnes, you're going to get horribly tortured, and I'm going to decide that as judge and jury. Like, that's dark on one. Like, in terms of, like,
very
a
dark.
hero moment.
Yeah, not the best.
That's not what the hero should do with the villain.
Yeah.
Nope.
On the other hand, she did kill a puppy, so...
Yeah. Well, see, and that's that whole thing, and I don't think we've mentioned it yet here, is like, is the puppy real? And how much does Agatha know if the puppy's real? And does she think the puppy's real? Like, because was Agatha trying to understand if the puppy was real? Like, what is happening with the children? She threatens the lives of the children. She kills the puppy. But like, if she's the person in the story that knows more about magic than anyone, and she may know that, like, yes, you can create these beings and they can seem sentient, but they're not. They're just illusions. Like, does she have an idea that everything going on in the Hex is not real? And is she thinking of this as like Grand Theft Auto Westview, and she can do whatever the hell she wants with the NPCs,
Right. Yeah, we get into I love the term NPCs, because we get into so many, all the ethical questions that come up around artificial intelligence or clones or drones or whatever it is, and it's all that's there to explore, and we don't really get a chance to dive into. There's so much to talk about. There's a couple of the questions I know we want to hit on, so I want to shift and go to the very end of Wanda's story, which is, at the end, she does fly off. And she's not living a happy life. On the one hand, she's kind of like happy, peacefully sipping her tea and is basically Lord of the Rings setting. My partner asked, "Is this WandaVision now discovers orcs? Is that what happens at the end here?" But I think you can see it as she is punishing herself. She's putting herself in self-isolation. But to me, one of the things that I think is essential, Paul, to what you were saying about like you're okay letting someone walk away if they have a firm understanding of I won't do that again. Like I've learned my lesson. I'm no longer a danger to someone else. Because for me, that's more important than anything else. It's not even punishment. It's just like, are we causing more harm to happen by you having the chance to do more harm? And then in that very last scene, at the very end of the post-credit scene, we see her reading the Darkhold and something happening with her kids. And the Darkhold isn't like a book of fluffy, happy bunnies and unicorns and magic. It's the Book of the Damned. I read that as maybe she hasn't learned her lesson. Maybe she is still going to try to say, okay, well, I don't have closure from grief yet. I am still willing to play with powers I don't fully understand in order to maybe try and get my family back, and that more villainy is possible. What did you take from it?
I don't know what was happening at the end. I don't think we're meant to know. And so you can certainly read the scene in a lot of different ways. I think that's a totally legit way of reading it. You said before, something about a pattern, but the thing in Lagos, I don't actually think was villainous. I
don't know either. Yeah,
there's a whole thing there, but
no, I don't think it's. I think it. Go on, make your point.
I don't even think it's really in a pattern of not knowing your abilities, but yeah, it's like who teaches you, and she has powers that are like almost nobody else on Earth, like even in that world, like really understand or know what to do with. And so it's, it's like, well, is the best thing to like go up on the mountain and just kind of be alone where you can't cause any direct harm to anybody? I think that's part of her thinking, right? Like to kind of self-isolate. But then do you run more of the risk of, you have no one there to kind of serve as a check on you as your sort of secondary conscience or whatever.
No accountability, yeah.
Yeah, and, I guess Doctor Strange would probably be the person who made the most sense. Does she, particularly know Doctor Strange? They were both in that one big battle together, but, she had been on Earth, he had been on, Titan? Or whatever?
Yeah.
Agatha mentions the Sorcerer Supreme, and Wanda's not like, who is that? But other than that, I don't think we've seen them interact much at all.
Yeah, so, that might be the person to go to and be like, hey, about this magic stuff, I seem to have some of it. I might be more powerful than you, but I could use a consult,
Yeah.
And so I think that the end is like, yeah, they're laying sort of the groundwork for whatever they want to do next. And
it's definitely wide open, and they could make it anything they want to.
Yeah, they definitely could.
I feel like it would be very unsatisfying if she's just like, now she's the real villainous.
Yeah. I think, to me, to answer your question, Matthew, it is that she absolutely learned a lesson. Mm-hmm. And that lesson is that it was her naivete, that word, naivete, that caused this. She did not know enough. She didn't even know what she was. This was all a mistake. And as Vision says, I really hope that you just recently started to understand what's going on here, because that this was all a mistake at first. And I think that's what it was. It was pure, wishing on a star. She created this entire hex. And then it was just she doesn't even know what's going on. She's just enjoying her life with Vision, and then realizes what's going on as she goes. And it's not until Agatha really confronts her that she even knows what a Scarlet Witch is, knows that she is a witch, knows that she has the power to do this stuff. She just sort of slowly puts that together. And so the lesson she learned is my lack of knowledge caused me to cause a lot of pain along with the thing I wanted to do. So I have this great power, and now I need to learn about that great power. And the only knowledge she has in front of her is the Darkhold. And so now she's turning to the Darkhold to try to learn as much as she can. Now,
right.
We know as like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans or Marvel fans or whatever that the Darkhold, and as Agatha says, it's the Book of the Damned, like we know there's something suspicious about this book. But I don't know that she really understands that. She thinks of it, this is my only source of knowledge about the thing that I am, and I'm going to try to learn. So this could be her turning to a time of study that she thinks she's going to learn about her powers so she doesn't do a bad thing unintentionally again. The problem is something seems suspect. It definitely, the color scheme and the music seemed suspect at the end.
The fact that Agatha specifically warned her about that, like it's not a... I think you're right that we as we have some outside knowledge that tells us that the Darkhold is not like, the happy book, but so does Wanda. And I think that's...
Sort of. I mean, Agatha is not a reliable source, though. Come on.
She also says, like, it's the Book of the Damned, but she also says, you are the damned. Like, you are the thing that is in this book.
It's the book of you.
This is the book of you. It's telling you the story of you. That's what this is how we know what you are. And so she's like, well, I need to read that, even if it's darkness, even if it's something that I, even if there's more in there than I want to know, like I need to know it.
I think it's a good point there. And I think the writers left it in a, it's very much kind of an almost J.J. Abrams mystery box thing of what is she doing with Darkhold? We don't know. Like, it could be totally benign. It could be setting her up to be even more of a big bad. I think the thing where I come down with Wanda is, and actually, let me preface this by saying, when I'm talking about Wanda being problematic, I absolutely don't want it to be that we're singling her out. I think I said this on the podcast Paul and I did a while back about Age of Ultron. But for example, I think Tony Stark should be serving many life sentences in prison if he was still alive for creating Ultron. I think that there's many, many times where superheroes have done horrible things without realizing it, and lots of harm is done. And I'm not saying Wanda should be singled out. I think a lot of the time we should be saying because I think, Paul, you're right. It's she doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't understand. But I think that the flip side of that is if you have this power, what's the responsibility that you have? Because one of the things that I keep coming back to is, and I know, Paul, you feel very differently about the show than Matt and I do, but at least you understand the conceit of it. The TV show The Boys is all about a world in which the everyday humans are basically just abused and treated horribly and terribly, and are constantly the collateral damage of superheroes. And everyone just kind of shrugs and is well, but they're superheroes. That's what they're going to do. People die. Yeah. Ah, well. And that's presented in this dystopian hellscape.
Right.
And the whole hero's journey of the one of the main characters of The Boys starts because his girlfriend dies in an accident. And the person who kills him by accident is clearly careless and doesn't give a damn, is a terrible person, but it's by accident. And I guess so that's sort of my point, is I feel I look at what Wanda did, and I feel clearly she didn't realize what she was doing. I do think she realized halfway through. Vision and Monica both try to confront her. So
I don't think gradually gaining realization, basically, and trying to deny it, I think. Right. I think she's living in denial. But
which again is to me also a very relatable villain thing of I just don't want to see the harm I'm causing.
Right.
And I think there's a much deeper set of questions. I guess I'm just still stuck on. I'm very scared about the idea of a world in which people who have this much power, there's a sort of sense of well, they're going to hurt other people, but they don't mean to, so we're just going to be okay with it.
Right. I mean, we live in that world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. I don't like it.
The question is, what is the right action and to take to prevent that? And, in this world, it's even a little more complicated than in our world. I think what you guys are talking about there is inequality. Someone has tons of power, and we don't have that. We don't have superpowers here, but we have money, and we have this bad inequality that causes these power dynamics where someone in great power can make a small decision that barely affects their lives, but it hurts people downstream. And our answer there is equalize that power, but that's not the world we're looking at here. These people are, what's the power? How do you put checks? And I mean, that's what I feel like. It's interesting because I feel like that's what Marvel has been playing at since Civil War. Like, how do you put checks on superheroes? And now they're getting back into that question. They had to kind of get together to fight Thanos, and now it's like they're immediately getting right back to that question. And I'm curious how much they'll really deal with it, how much that'll just be an ongoing thread, or if they'll really try to answer that question, because there isn't really an answer. You know, it's just like, what do you do? And I think like consequences is important, but like having a proper response to like this particular scenario, like how do you respond to Wanda doing a horrible thing unintentionally because her power is so great that she doesn't understand it? Right. And in the comics, this is directly addressed. They decide Wanda needs to be killed. Like that's the solution in comics is she goes mad and she's doing these sorts of things because of her mental illness, and they decide the only proper course is to murder her. And like, they're not happy about it, but they just have to do it. And that's awful. And it's a really bad thing. The heroes go to kill Wanda Maximoff because she's gone mad. And like with Doctor Strange being called the Multiverse of Madness and the acronym being MOM and her currently looking for her kids. Like, I really wonder how close they're going to get to that storyline.
I hope we don't go there. We recently did an episode I did with other guests on the Dark Phoenix and all that. And one of the things that I talked about there was that there is this trope in superhero stuff and in any kind of in science fiction as well about the woman who is so powerful that she's so dangerous and she's mentally unstable, and it's always kind of like sexy, crazy kind of trope, and that she needs men to like control her and protect her from herself and protect everyone else from her. And there's a lot of misogyny in that trope, and I know that like some version of the Scarlet Witch have told that kind of a story. And I think there's a lot of interesting things we can go there, to be sure, Matt, with what you're talking about. I just hope that part of the trope we avoid, because so I think I totally hear what you're saying. I just want to point out that one aspect of the trope is one that I very much hope we avoid.
Absolutely. It's always tricky because basically the crazy woman trope is a trope, but it's also, does that mean you can never tell a story about a mentally ill woman that makes these decisions? So it's like, I totally agree with you. I don't want them to make it tropified, but they've also laid a lot of groundwork with her, the experience she's had, to give her a lot of grief and a lot of things to lash out about. And sure. I don't know. I just don't know I don't know where they're going, and it definitely seems to line up with some of those comics origins. But it's definitely a dicey territory, and I don't think the right answer is to kill her. But like that, and that's the thing in the comics. Like, certain heroes think that, and certain heroes don't, and you have to kind of like weigh those options. As there's like the Punisher's like, of course we have to kill her.
Frank.
With the Punisher, I'd be like, if you want to talk about villains who are portrayed as heroes,
right. I think Wanda's closest analog in the MCU is like Hulk, where she's mostly like here and there, and a very important character in a bunch of stories that aren't necessarily her own. Here she gets, her most recent is her one story that's hers, and Hulk's was like his first story. But, Hulk has this power that he doesn't fully understand at first, that he can't fully control, and he's constantly living in the, his power is how he can do good in the world, right? But it's also how he can, you want to talk about collateral damage, and I think, you can look at it and think that like Hulk and Wanda are kind of like big reasons that you end up getting the Sokovia Accords. But to kind of touch on what you were saying before, Matthew, like, the Sokovia Accords are called the Sokovia Accords, like, probably because like Tony Stark made a murder bot that, with a little help from Bruce Banner, although, he specifically was like, I'll only deal with Bruce on this because, because he's the one who won't really challenge me, right? He won't hold me accountable and be like, we really shouldn't be doing this. Even the second time.
I think it's an interesting point is like, we're always showing that the world presents Hulk as like a villain, but I can't think of a single story where it seemed like the writers were saying maybe Hulk is the villain, the way they were definitely saying like Wanda might be the villain of this story for quite a while of this show.
Yeah, he becomes the antagonist at points in Avengers and in Age of Ultron, right? But he's not, he's not like, this is, maybe he's really the villain. It's like, well, Bruce thinks this or that, but we know he'll figure it out and everything will be okay. And eventually, he become Professor Hulk, and maybe we need like Professor Wanda. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of like
Scarlet Professor.
We've got this thing with her right now where she seems to have this duality. And the Hulk is a great analog for this last scene where she's a girl sipping a tea, recovering from her grief on a porch, but she's also seems like she's this dark witch reaching out into whatever, the multiverse, the dark dimension, whatever, and to try to find her children. And it's like her I don't know, ego and id like living separately, and it's very it's very Hulk-like in a way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So again, there's so much more we can talk about her and just all the questions that she opens up, and everything about like, the Sokovia Accords and all that. I do want to move on. I do want to just say quickly, obviously one issue that I think we haven't discussed much, because it's not really like where the three of us, as guys are coming on it, is obviously gender is a big part of this, and the way that she is viewed, it's fantastic that we have yet another strong woman character. We need a lot more, but at least we're getting some more into the MCU and her getting her own story like this. There's some great writing that's been done about, the way that she is portrayed and in terms of being a villain or not, and how gender plays into that I think is not really our lane, at least certainly not mine as a guy to get too into, but I'm going to include links to those writings in the show notes. Just want to say kind of like, as the host of this, I was definitely aware of like the makeup of who we had talking about this. I think it was a great conversation to be had there, but there's some conversations there that other people are talking about that are definitely worth checking out. So please do that. Shifting to the next one, we're going to get to Agatha and Hayward, but I want to, Matt, especially give you a chance to do this. We have a moment of a true multiverse happen where we don't get the X-Men come in, but the Starship Enterprise basically appears in Westview in the version of the Ship of Theseus. Can you talk for a minute about why the Vision philosophical debate was basically like a Star Trek type ethical like moment, and why that meant so much to you, or why do you think that was important and awesome?
Oh man, in so many ways, it was a Star Trek moment. Like this is, well, there's literally a moment in Star Trek where Spock, a dark version of Spock, is convinced to join the rebellion in the mirror universe, or start the rebellion in the mirror universe, that this very much mirrored. But also just the idea of talking the computer down with logic is just almost half of the episodes of the original series is Kirk somehow convincing an evil computer that it doesn't need to evil anymore. And this was great. And just, it's not a fight. They don't have they do have a fight, and that's often the way that Star Trek is. It'll have a little fight, but the resolution is not the fight, because that's the thing. You don't win things with violence. You actually win the battle with the treaty. You know what I mean? And that's this moment of them like coming to an agreement and an understanding, and you win it through sharing knowledge. And I love that. And this was a great moment of that.
I also thought it was amazing. I have very little to add, especially in terms of like Star Trek context. But the idea of using logic to solve problems is greatly appealing to me.
Same.
So, I like that Wanda solved her problem through cleverness.
Right.
It wasn't just power. It was like she learned something because her opponent was prone to monologuing and expository dialogue, and she taught her an immediate lesson on the dangers of expository dialogue. But the Vision thing was just peak, logic prevails, which unfortunately it doesn't often enough in life.
I think what I especially loved about that moment is that it's not even just, it's one thing to sort of try to logic someone else out of their anger. Like I was reading something earlier today about why isn't Tony able to recognize that the Bucky who killed Tony's parents wasn't really Bucky? It was, and it's because Tony is like half out of his mind with grief over his father's death and all of his own regrets. Like, he's not thinking rationally in that point. And, he's not really very susceptible to a logical argument in that moment.
Yeah.
But the other, to me, and I think logic is still a good thing, and it's helpful to break through when you can and not just punchy punch everything, but I understand it there. To me, the Vision on Vision fight is something else where it's, White Vision is fighting because of what he's been told to do. And so he thinks he's doing the right thing. And so being able to say, I'm going to recognize that you think you're making this conscious decision to do this thing, and I'm going to respect that and now try and convince you that what you really should want to do is something else. It's basically all about him giving White Vision his own agency in a way that you're right. It's so Star Trek. It's Dormammu and Doctor Strange. And I love action movies being able to sometimes say, we don't need a big fight to win this.
Yeah. Well, it's also sorry, good.
Just Vision making Vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep calling him the White Vision, the whole point of the conversation is that's Vision, right? And he's not really functioning as Vision, but then other Vision is like, wait, but you're Vision. And he's like, oh, shit, I am Vision.
Yeah. I'll also just say here's a quick plug on Superhero Ethics. A week before this came out, with unfortunate timing,
this was hilarious.
We did an episode all about cloning and are you really yourself if you upload yourself from a week ago and all this kind of stuff. And we're basically going to have to re-record the episode because there's just so much in this that was exactly those questions. But definitely check it out because I think it's a very good conversation with Rob McKenzie. So let's get into Agatha. What does she want?
I don't know.
Is she just wanting power? Is she genuinely concerned that the Scarlet Witch is a bad thing? Where do you think Agatha falls in all this?
I do think that she is mostly seeking power. That seems to be her predominant MO. But I do think there's a part of her that wants to be good. Like that very first part of her origin story, she's like, I can be good. And her mom tells her she can't.
Yeah, that was harsh.
That's real harsh.
That's not cool, Mom.
That's not good parenting. But there's also something in there that of her wanting to be good. And when she tells when she steals all of Agatha's power and becomes kind of the full Scarlet Witch, she goes full on X-Men suit Scarlet Witch. She says, you have no idea what you've unleashed. And it seems like with genuine concern in her voice. You know what I mean? And we don't know what that line means yet. We don't know if it means the Scarlet Witch is this thing to be feared, or if Agatha, her power was holding something back, a la Doctor Strange with Dormammu and the Time Stone. We don't know what that line means yet. I think we will find out. It could just be that the Scarlet Witch is so powerful that you don't know what you've unleashed by becoming yourself, which is kind of a dark thing in itself. But she does seem to actually be concerned with the fact, because at that point she has lost, she's done, and her appeal is you've done something really bad here that's going to lead to bad things, and it doesn't seem to be anymore be a power seeking moment. So I think there's definitely something in there with her that is more than just power seeking, but I don't know what the balance is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, it felt. Sorry, I'm looking at Anonymous Narwhal editing the thing. You can cut that out if you want.
I do.
For me, I felt. I mean, I didn't enjoy Agatha as a character the way I think a lot of people did. I felt like what I saw was this sort of mustache twirler, as you are wont to say. Somebody who basically was just seeking power. I can see that there were hints of other things. I wish that those were explored a little more if they were meant to be meaningful and not, just Marvel trolling people another time. At the end, I really did feel like she was trying to say something and Wanda cut her off there. And maybe that's going to be a really important thing she was going to say. But at the same time, I can understand Wanda maybe not really want to hear it from her anymore.
Trusting her.
Yeah, or trusting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, listen, I don't want to hear another word out of you. Like, you've been manipulating me. And I think throughout the thing, I mean, I'd like to rewatch the whole series, even though I didn't totally love it. I think being able to see it straight through, I mean, first of all, for a second time knowing what was happening, but also just seeing it straight through and kind of things coming right after the other, I think is a very different experience to watching it all at once. Please just release seasons all at once.
Binge is best.
No way.
For
no
podcasting, this is obviously like peak content release fashion. But,
yeah, I love. Well, and also for like I mentioned at the top, like all that theory crafting over Pietro or Fietro that like didn't come to anything, but I had a blast doing it. Like, and I loved arguing with Jeff about how his Mephisto theories were wrong. Like that was so much fun, and it's not just because of podcasting. Like it's the conversations I've been having since I was like 6 years old, standing outside, like talking to my friends about what was going to happen on Star Trek next week. I love the week-to-week model personally.
I mean, that's why Paul and I started this podcast to begin with, was those kind of conversations.
Yeah, man.
But not over things being week to week. But
But Paul, I think I mentioned I binged it with my partner, and I just think it works so much better as a binge. I hate week to week, but that's another debate for another time.
Yeah, again, to each their own.
To each their own, for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think, knowing what I know now, I think this is a very good show to rewatch because the Agatha moments are so, like, every Agnes moment, you're just like, oh my god, how did I not see it? It's so
right. They all hit different, right?
They hit so, and it's just one of those like the little things are there so well.
Right.
Go on.
Well, I guess then maybe I would ask you, like, do you feel like that was clearly there that she, like, I didn't really see somebody who wanted more than, like, I'm going to take your power. I've been manipulating you this whole time. And I mean, I personally could have done without Agatha, without Hayward, and just like a story. I mean, I don't know how you'd resolve it, you know, in terms of just Wanda doing this thing, but, at the end, I definitely felt like she just turned into this, like, I'm just going to take your power. And like, that was what her motivations for that. I mean,
I feel
to
like
have more power.
I think Agatha and to some extent Hayward, and for similar reasons, are my biggest frustration with the writers, because I think it is to some extent bad writing, because it felt to me like the writers couldn't decide because on one hand, you're right, we get this very sympathetic backstory for Agatha. And
wait, what? Where she kills all the other witches?
Where she wants to be good. Where she, like... I mean, to me, I thought there was a very strong parallel between Agatha and Wanda.
Okay.
Of, like, Agatha's someone who doesn't understand
I thought so
her
too,
powers.
yeah.
And everyone's like, Agatha, you're bad. You're not trying to use your powers. And she's like... And she's being attacked. I mean, she's literally self-defense. And
then she's cackling. I don't know. I didn't get that read from that scene, but that's definitely more interesting.
Yeah, but I guess that's what I mean. Is I feel like there's some. It's frustrating because the setups of I feel like Agnes is incredible writing, and I feel like they tried to kind of have it both ways with Agatha. Of she's the mustache twirler who wants power, and she's this very sympathetic person who is worried about the Scarlet Witch, or that she wants power for these sympathetic reasons. I
think they were in a tough spot that they put themselves in, where, like, basically your sympathy and the extent to which you kind of believe and relate to Agatha is inversely proportional to, how much you accept kind of Wanda's, like, what she does in the end, and sort of where she is at the end. So, Wanda's just like, you're in sitcom jail for the rest of your life. Like, if we related more to Agatha, then I don't think we're able to feel as fondly towards Wanda. And I think the writers kind of put themselves in that position, and it's a difficult spot. I'm not sure how they could have done it better, but I feel like it was a little bit of an issue there.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of my point. Is it feels to me like for the most part they set up this very morally gray, morally complicated situation, but then at the end they wanted the audience to be so solidly on the side of Wanda, so that we really felt like the pain of that and grief of her loss, and which was beautifully done. But they were sort of like, okay, actually, let's make Agatha just really bad so that Wanda is sympathetic, and that's where I was just like, I wish you'd done better on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a weird balance to strike because I kind of like where they placed it. Like you were saying, it feels like they didn't know what they wanted to do, which I think is a fair criticism, but it also is like that's what a gray story looks like. Like that's what, like all these characters, we can sit and have this conversation for an hour and a half because because they didn't make a decision that Agatha was for sure the bad guy, and they didn't make these decisions that like Hayward is definitely fully 100% a dick. You know, like there's all these little ways you can wriggle out of it, and every character is sort of internally consistent with what they want to do. Now, certain ones, we don't have a clear vision yet of what they want. Like, we don't know for sure that Agatha only sought power or if there was a little bit of good in her. And we don't know if Hayward was legitimately worried about keeping the world safe or if he's just out to seek the power. But I think that I find this sort of interesting storytelling, the way that it shook out, because we can have this conversation and there aren't decisions made for us.
Yeah, I guess just to me, it just felt like I didn't feel the internal consistency. It felt a little bit like with both Hayward and Agatha that they kind of were like, I felt like they very much wanted Hayward to be 100% a dick, and that they very much wanted Agatha. I don't think they wanted you to have any sympathy for Agatha when she gets locked in sitcom jail
at the end, right?
Yeah.
I felt like they pivoted away from that sort of complexity at the end, and like I didn't dislike how things ended, but it definitely felt a little simplified compared to the sort of complexity of earlier.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true.
Also, you said we didn't have a clear vision, so I like that. I thought that was fun. So he's not clear, but he's a vision.
Let's go to Hayward and Sword.
Project Cataract.
How are we feeling about living in a world that Sword now exists in?
Oh. Bad.
They're a government organization. Surely it's bad, right? They're a shadowy government organization. And of course it's going to be bad.
I will say before Matt shed some actual light on this, that like it was weird seeing the FBI as kind of like the good government organization right after watching Judas and the Black Messiah.
Also
where
legit.
I mean, like the FBI has historically done horrible things, and that doesn't mean they don't also do some things stopping people from doing bad things. But like Jimmy Woo is one of my favorite characters, who I just yesterday learned predates Marvel. But
whoa, interesting.
Yeah, like he's from Atlas Comics or Atlas, whatever.
Anyway,
there's a whole thing there. But like I really enjoyed Wu and Darcy, but like the FBI being the agency that steps in to stop Sword from doing what, like I feel like we just throughout, like we don't get a clear idea like what Sword really is and like who funds them,
right?
And are they legit? Are they like SHIELD, which was this secret organization? Like, aren't we done with that? Like, is there any chance that they're not also infiltrated by Hydra? Like, I don't know. I have so many questions. I'm really tired of having an organization like this in the stories, but it would be almost inconceivable to think that organizations like this wouldn't pop up in a world like this. So yeah. I'm kind of torn there.
That's fair.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fair. It's hard, man. Anytime that humans build in these stories, it seems like anytime the humans build these organizations to try to like arrest any power back from, these like godlike creatures that are like ruling them, if they don't arrest that power back, then it always seems to turn out poorly. And we get these sort of like bureaucrats or whatever that are like seeking their own power or shouldn't be going overboard. And part of that is because we're writing these stories often to make the superpowered people to be heroes.
Right.
And you get characters like Monica and Coulson who like view the superheroes as people and people that can be allies or villains. And I guess that's the real tale of Hayward. Like Hayward in the very first episode, his first thing he says, there's a lot of threats out there. There's a lot of threats have popped up out there since you blipped away, Monica. And she says, but there's a lot of allies too.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Hayward believes that. I think that Hayward believes that like if they're a sentient weapon or, you know, a superpowered individual, as we might call it, they're bad and we have to stop them and we can't trust them.
Right.
Yeah. Or they're a threat.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And I think I wanted to be sympathetic to Hayward in that, I mean, I've talked before on the Superhero Ethics podcast. I've talked before about how one of my absolute favorite characters in all of superhero media is Amanda Waller, who, for those who don't know,
so good.
From the DC universe, she's the non-powered person who's basically kind of the head of the kind of like, you know, like we need to be able to, you know, she's the one who's like, let's always have some kryptonite on hand in case Superman goes bad. You know, she always is wanting to make sure that like we have a way to deal with superheroes because they can always go bad and we have to be ready to have threats against them. And she's portrayed as an antagonist, but also often a very sympathetic one. And I kind of wanted, because I think you're right, Matt, I think that we can headcanon it somewhat to get Hayward to that point. But it felt like the show wasn't quite sure if he was like, I'm trying to think how to best say this. Like, there was the potential there, but I feel like we needed one more episode on the backstory of Sword. You know, on where does this come from? What is it that they're so concerned about? Is it all about like, you know, the loss of control on Earth or these possible alien invasions or whatever is happening? Because the way it was portrayed, I did feel like he did just come across as like, I want power for power's sake, you know, and then I'm willing to because on some level, I remember watching the scene of him like tearing apart Vision, and it's horrible and it's wrong, but I also was kind of thinking like, well, yeah, like Thanos just invaded, half the population just got blipped out, like we're in real trouble. We need to figure out how to deal with these kind of threats. And the way he manipulates Wanda is obviously super shitty, and I get where the problem there is. But I kept feeling like I wanted to be sympathetic to him, but the show never quite did it. And then again, I feel like if he had had a moment where he was telling his troops, like, and be ready to fire if you have to, and the troops had said, but sir, they're kids, and he said, no, those aren't kids, those are mental constructs. Then I feel like him shooting at the kids, I could be like, he's doing this for some, like, you know, he fundamentally doesn't believe that there's moral value there and it's okay to do it.
Right.
The fact that we don't get that scene, I feel like it means we're just supposed to think Hayward's a dick who'll shoot at kids to protect his... Because they remember the whole point is covering his ass. He doesn't want to get caught.
Yeah, that's true. See, that's the thing about Hayward in this is that it turns out all the things that he's stepping outside of his authority and trying to create a sentient weapon and willing to frame other people. And so that's where the real, like, Hayward is wrong and Hayward is bad, because he is, you know, choosing to do all of that.
Right.
Yeah, to me, like, I felt like Hayward was just this, like, generic shitty authority figure who is like, I'm in charge because I'm in charge, and I'm not really going to listen to anybody I'm working with. I'm not going to tell them what I'm doing. I'm just going to order a drone strike on someone who's mind controlling a bunch of people. Like, he doesn't, like, is there a way to know that, like, if somebody's mind controlling people and then you just, like, kill the person doing the mind control, that the other people are going to be okay? Like, that, like, breaks the spell? Like, what if it just makes them vegetables? Yeah. Like, you know, and this is not to mention that the person doing the mind control literally just, you know, saved the world or saved half the world and then saved the whole or whatever. Like, with a bunch of other people, it's like, yeah, I do think there's some leeway. You know, in terms of, like, okay, you just, like, beat down Thanos. Like, yeah, you should probably get like, we should talk instead of drone striking you. Like, besides the fact that I'm just kind of against drone striking people in general, but like he just, I felt to an extent like they went out of their way to make him, you know, a dick, but also, you know, like villainous, like doing something that maybe some people would think, okay, well, clearly we have to do something, right? Like, I think that's a given, right? This is a hostage situation. We have to do something. But I kind of think a lot of the, you know, looking at Hayward like, oh, well, he's just kind of doing his job or whatever, comes from this idea that, like, authority is, like that authority is necessary, earned. Like, he's the director because he's the director, and Monica was gone, and yeah, maybe she shouldn't be the director either. Like, maybe she only would have been the director because of nepotism, right? We don't know. Like, we didn't see any of the backstory of S.W.O.R.D. And, like, until further notice, like, I'll just assume they're, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra, you know? But, like, you know, the fact that Hayward asks so few questions, and his goal seems to be just to get, you know, Vision back online, which, like, again, like, why does the U.S. government, is S.W.O.R.D. part of the U.S. government, or are they an international entity? And if they're part of the U.S. government, why do they have possession of Vision's body? Like, and definitely they shouldn't be just trying to resurrect it as a weapon, right? It being his body. You know?
Yeah. And also, like, something we didn't mention earlier when we were talking about Vision's agency and getting a chance is they also lied to Vision. They deliberately took away his memories so that he would be on their side. They recreate a sentient weapon, and then they basically, like, gaslight him into believing that Wanda is only a threat and nothing else.
Right.
Which is, again, why that Ship of Theseus moment is so important, because it's all about reclaiming his agency and his real identity.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, and those memories, which is like, and being brought out of the big lie that's going on, that Wanda is only there to harm people.
For sure. So, I again, we could go so deep on all these questions, and I'm sure we're going to have more time. I want to finish up by getting a bit meta here and talking about the fietro of it all. And I think I really like the way you framed this from the beginning, Matt, of... Because I know a lot of people are very mad, like, oh, we got trolled about Mephisto and things like that. I think there's a really interesting conversation here of, like I remember the whole time we were going through and we were getting very deep into these theories about Mephisto and stuff like that. Part of where I was pushing back a bit was, I don't want us to get to a point where, in order to understand a comic, in order to understand a TV show or a movie, you have to have read all the comic books or have to have really studied it all. And I like the idea of these stories being inspired by stuff, but still being fairly standalone. But it sounds like we're all kind of in agreement there that, like, there's nothing wrong with running with these theories. But I feel like this was a show that was very clearly saying, like, we're not. You can do all the theory crafting you want to, but we're not here to feed that necessarily. And it seemed like it was kind of a nice reminder, like, the theorizing is fun, but, like, we need to just trust what's on the screen.
Yeah.
In terms of that being, like, what exists.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I personally think that what Marvel does on, like, in almost every movie, I mean, this one was particularly interesting because of the fietro of it all, but, like, in terms of everything they do, they are always balancing, like, multiple ways of thinking about these stories. They have to write them so that the average person can watch the story and just enjoy it. They have to write it so that the deep comics fan can get their references fulfilled, but still be surprised, still have the possibility of surprise. And I think they do a really interesting thing where they play enough with doing things based in comics, and then they do enough with changing things so that no matter how you feel about it, and I thought this one was particularly wonderful because, like, throughout the entire story, I could, like, look at any possible theory and go, yeah, I guess that could still be true. Yeah, that could be Mephisto. And the more you know, the more theories you could spin from comics. But, like, none of those theories had to be true. And I kept bringing us back to that on the MCU cast. I kept being like, yeah, but this could just be Wanda. Like, yeah, Agatha, yeah, Mephisto, yeah, this, that, but this could just be Wanda. And that's what I loved about the story, is how they have so many different audiences they are trying to entertain and keep interested. And I just find it such an interesting balancing act. And I understand why some people that watch this are probably thinking they did a bad job in this particular instance, because some people came in thinking, no, this needs to be Mephisto for this to happen. This has to be Mephisto. And if it's not, then all these Easter eggs, but all those Easter eggs about like the devil and darkness and like that's just her talking about being a witch. Those all operate as witchy Easter eggs as well as they do devil or Mephisto Easter eggs. So I think they did a great job of balancing all of that. And I am, I guess, more forgiving, but I don't mind that the things I really kind of wanted at times didn't happen, because I had a great time theorizing and I had a great time. I think the story ended well. And it really ended up focusing on its own story, which I think is always important. And Marvel always does well. That yes, they put in Easter eggs for the next thing, but they never make the story you're watching about the bigger thing. And I think that's a really cool thing they do, and a lesson they learned a long time ago. Even though you know that Iron Man's leading to Avengers, throw Nick Fury at the end saying Avengers are coming, but don't make the end of the story the Avengers showing up. You know what I mean? Yeah. Don't make the end of the story Wonder Woman showing up. You know what I mean?
I think that makes sense. I think for me, the rule of thumb that I think of is, I would hate it if you get to a point where if you sit down to watch this, if you haven't heard the word Mephisto before you start watching, you're not going to get to fully enjoy it. Like, to me, that's the line that should never be crossed.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I think what I think they do well, and I think is necessary in something like this, is to basically have some foreshadowing for people who, there's Easter eggs for people who are very into the comics, and then there's some foreshadowing for people who maybe aren't into the comics, but, are watching, and then when something's a reveal, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, the Agatha reveal doesn't not work if you don't know who Agatha Harkness is. Right. I think it doesn't hit the same. Like, I was kind of like, okay, but and also everybody had been saying that's who it was anyway. So, so some of the if you have people who don't know a bunch of these things and people who do, it's like, for me, it was a little awkward. Like, I really love watching a story with no idea what's going on, and no spoilers.
Me too.
And I don't want, I want to kind of have my own theories while I'm watching something, but I don't really want to hear a bunch of theories between episodes. And if I did, I think it would have been a great experience to be able to follow along and have, listen to all the podcasts and engage with all the theories. But the whole bubble thing, I didn't even know that was a thing until after the first week. I saw, something that, in fairness, it said this is a bit of a spoiler, and then I looked at it anyway. Part of that's just because of the way, Facebook scrolls or whatever.
Right.
But and then I knew that the bubble was a thing, and that took away some for me, from the experience. But whatever, that's fine. That's just kind of how it is, right? But I feel like having red herrings is essential if you're going to have any level of mystery about anything. And so, you can have a bunch of Easter eggs that are just like, oh, this is just a reference to this company that exists in world, and it doesn't come to anything, right? But it's just kind of a nod.
Yeah.
And then you can have things that's like, oh, this is a reference to this company that exists in world, and it's actually going to become a really big deal. And then you can have other things where you're like, oh, is that so-and-so? And then it's like, no, it's actually not. And that's fine, because in order to, I think you want the viewer to have an idea and some expectations about what might come next. Mm-hmm. But if you always pay off every single potential Easter egg, every potential reference, then there's just going to be no surprise. And I think, having that kind of that combination, that kind of sweet spot of some of the things that you think are going to happen, come through, so you kind of feel like vindicated on some of your theories, and then like some of them don't, so there's still some element of surprise in terms of how things actually play out. I think that's kind of the sweet spot, and I feel like they did a good job with that. I wasn't so attached to any of the particular theories, so it's kind of easier for me to say. But
so let me though get into the Pietro at all, because
yeah,
this one I will admit it bothers me a bit, and I want to talk it through with you all and hear what you all think, because it's, I guess here's the way that I see it. For me, part of what Marvel is doing here is saying, listen, if you want a theory craft, have fun. But we are going to tell a story that exists on this screen as it is. And that we don't want you to try and say, like, that if we do A and B, just because A and B led to C in a comic book does not mean that A and B will lead to C here. And it seemed like a lot of the show was kind of like a nice, like, reminder, like, don't think, we are not bringing in outside stuff like that. So to intentionally cast someone from the X-Men like the whole to cast what's the guy's name? Evan Taylor?
Evan Peters, yeah.
So to cast Evan Peters in that way, it felt like it was Marvel kind of breaking its own rules to me, because it was kind of saying, like, on the one hand, it was saying, like, hey, fans, don't play this game, just trust the show on its own. But then also saying, oh, actually, we're going to play the game even better than you and make you just look stupid. I don't know. I did think that it would be fun if that was the way. Like, I think I agree with you that overall I like that this is not how we're going to bring the X-Men in. I think once they introduced him, and I thought maybe this is how they're bringing the X-Men in, it was an interesting idea and I was fine with it. I think now looking back on it, if the whole thing is just a way to make a boner joke, like, I mean, granted, it's more than that, obviously, but I don't know. It just felt like, I kind of feel like Marvel loses some of the high ground in the discussion of, like, because now it's not them saying, like, oh, just watch the story, don't try and, like, meta it all out, but it's actually saying, actually, you can meta it all out you want, we're going to let you think that, but then fuck with you as much as we want. And it just, I don't know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth. I'm curious how you all felt about it, because I think I'm more alone on that than you two.
Yeah,
I thought it was funny.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty funny too. And yes, it did, like, definitely troll a little bit.
Yeah, hardcore.
But it like in a kind of fun way to me. Like, it just didn't really bother me. But that is, as someone who really, they won me over. It's really weird because they won me over to the Pietro idea, which I was very against, or the fact that could be real Pietro. They won me over, and then they. So I wasn't one that was like, I really want this. I was one who was against it, and then they won me over and then didn't do it. And I think that's funny. They trolled me good, and I just had a good time. And, like, I don't know. I guess I do think it's a reminder that we don't have to do the story you want us to tell.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess whatever you think of that, everybody. There's a certain amount of fan service that's good, and a certain amount that is, like, too much. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't know. This is like them reminding us, yeah, we're gonna do fan service, but we still are gonna tell our own story. So I guess it just doesn't really bother me. It's them making their own story, which is good, I guess.
That's fair.
I feel like if I was invested in the idea of the Fox X-Men coming over to the MCU, I might find it upsetting. I can certainly understand that. The fact that I don't want that, never wanted that, haven't been excited about, the idea of all these other characters coming from other movies, like, I'm just kind of like, you made, like, the biggest shared universe in movie history. Like, maybe you don't need to bring in some other movies, like, just introduce those characters on your own. I mean, maybe there's some timeline issues. I don't know. I never bought the idea, though, that, like, this was, like, Fox Pietro, like, or, like, it just didn't make, like, how would that even work? I don't know. I'll go back and listen to all of your podcasts and see what Jeff was saying or whoever. But
let me ask you this, Paul, because like you said, I know this is something you're not invested in. If, in a later movie, a superhero is in some way going to, like, go to trial for Sokovia Accords things show up, and Charlie Cox shows up playing a blind lawyer who is defending them, but then is like, you know, isn't in any way Daredevil. It's just Charlie Cox playing a blind lawyer. You'd be totally okay with that?
Oh, please. Yes. I don't want Daredevil in the MCU. Like,
oh, really? I really want Daredevil in the MCU.
Netflix shows were like so perfect. Like, I get it. Like, I want those characters, but at the same time, like, I don't trust them.
That's fair. That's also very fair.
Like,
I don't, yeah.
Like, for me, like, the Netflix MCU is so separate. Like, they really didn't cross the streams very much at all. That, like, yeah. But if I really wanted him to come back, yeah, I guess I'd be pissed. But, like, would this courtroom take place in a magical bubble where nothing is as it seems?
Also fair.
Because I feel like that was like, you know, it's like, okay, so this is a troll. Like, it's definitely a troll.
Oh, it's 100%
you know?
a troll, yeah.
But, like, they did tell you, like, we're in a bubble here. Nothing is what it seems. Like, there's definitely some wild stuff going on. You probably shouldn't have a lot of trust. Also, the whole, like, they recast Darren. You know, they recast Becky. Like, this is like a sitcom thing. Like, I thought it was one of the funniest jokes in the series.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
She recast Pietro?
Yeah, I thought that was
a
brilliant moment.
Laugh
great.
so good.
Great.
Such a good laugh.
Yeah. That's fair. I can definitely understand that.
I mean, I thought you were going to, like, make a DC... Like, the analog for me would be, like, if you have, like... Well, they're already doing it. But it's like I want Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne in a Batman Beyond movie. Right. And if you somehow made it look like you were going to do that and then didn't do that, I'd be extremely disappointed. And I would dislike it as much as I already like the current DCEU. Yeah. Which, you know... Not my Batman, but like, you know, so I definitely understand how, not like understand how people feel in terms of like, feel that way, right. But I mean, I can get it, you know, it's like, but like, it definitely does feel like a little bit of a sort of like a caution post almost of like, yeah, they're going to tell the stories they're going to tell the way they're going to tell them, and it's not necessarily going to be exactly... It's not going to be exactly what you expect or exactly what you're hoping for all the time. And I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's a good lesson to learn.
I guess I very much want that lesson. I feel like the troll of it undercuts the caution post a little bit, because it's a little bit more like Marvel sort of being like, no, don't play that game because we'll play it better than you. Instead of saying
right.
But I think I can see both.
Or like a little mean-spirited kind of.
Yeah, it just feels a little mean-spirited, I think is kind of the idea of it. But I also think like I you know, I'm totally fine with it not happening. It didn't have to be that way, you know. Maybe it's not a boner joke, but anyway, that's just a matter of...
Yeah, I do think the boner joke was a little bit like... just it undercuts the whole idea of like it being it dishonors the people who feel like the theory crafting was so much fun. It's kind of like, yeah, but you're just all a big boner joke to us. Like, I get that the boner joke maybe is the mean-spirited part of it, but I generally like what they did.
For sure. And I would say, like, you know, compared to something like Supernatural, where they actually were like constantly mocking their own fans in a lot of ways. I feel like we're still much like, because I think you're right. They did do a lot. I think it would be possible for them to do this show in a way that was like, listen, you people who are theory crafting are stupid. We're the smart ones. We're writing the show. Shut up and like our show. I think they very clearly didn't do that. I think the people who wrote this show wanted folks to enjoy it the way my partner did, of just binging it and knowing nothing else but the show, and really wanted like folks like us to be able to spend every week, because, and I think this is a real testament, Matt, to what you and Jeff have built with the MCU cast, that we could spend every week just being like, oh my god, it's Mephisto, the Fly, what about the Fly, and like freeze frame it all, and there's enough to have fun with there, but then the story is, I think it's a testament to how well the story landed, you know, that we were able to be like, okay, well, we didn't get any of what we thought we wanted, but it was just still so good, so who cares?
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting about that as a podcaster is that, like, I was trying to do the same thing that we were trying to do. At least I was trying to do the same thing they were, which you really helped out with a lot, honestly. by being the guy who's like, hold on, I don't know anything about the comics. Can you explain that? Because, you know, after we've had the same conversation about Mephisto 6 times, sometimes I forget to go, because Jeff's the guy who always wants to reference the comics, and I'm the guy who's like, let's just talk about what's on the screen, you know?
Right.
And so we have that balance, but sometimes when Jeff's told me something 14 times, I tend to like, oh, yeah, that thing. And then we don't take the moment to explain to the listener, by the way, if you're a brand new listener to the podcast, this is what we're talking about. So that was really helpful, actually. So we appreciated your production. You've taken on production duties during that time.
I got a review of Star Wars Universe podcast that was really mad because we didn't know the exact names of these creatures that are only referenced in a Star Wars role-playing book.
Right.
And I was just like, honestly, that's the best... my approach to podcasting is I want to discuss the theories and ideas, and if you expect me to know like the hardcore trivia, there is a Star Wars trivia show coming up that I'm hosting, but that's another story entirely.
Or how to pronounce Yavin.
Yeah.
Sorry. I got to get my troll.
Yawin. Yawin. The Battle of Yawin. Anyway, I promised 90 minutes, and we're at 93 minutes right now. So Matt or Paul, any other kind of like last comments you want to say as we wrap up? I have one last thing I want to talk about, but any of the last
no, man, we're good. I'm good. Thanks for having me on this thing. This was fun.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I feel like I've enjoyed talking about the show at least as much as watching it. So,
that's always
same.
But it makes me more looking forward to like a rewatch at some point, just to kind of see how it all fits together and to kind of think about, you know, the characters and what they're doing, knowing kind of where they end up, seeing like, okay, what are they doing, and like how aware are they of what they're doing, stuff like that.
Well, and that's why I love like you said, you've enjoyed talking about it as much as you have watching it. Like, that's why I love the weekly thing, is because like, not only do you talk about the overall story, like the idea of Pietro and how he was a fake out, we would have gotten to, if we all binged this, we would have had one conversation about Pietro, and it would have just been like, oh, that was a funny fake out, instead of like getting to really dig in on like, what does it mean that he's like from the X-Men universe? Like, does it mean that Agatha pulled him from the multiverse? Does it mean that this happened or that happened? Like, all those like just fun things that we can have. So every ending becomes like a twist that we can like really dig in and discuss. And I just loved it. I'm so excited for this whole year. Like, Falcon Winter Soldier starts in a week, and we're gonna just like consume that just as hard. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm definitely with you there. I'm looking forward to all these kind of things. And I will say, I think I would have enjoyed this more as a binge, but I think the MCU cast, which I very much recommend people, if you haven't listened to it, listen to those episodes, not just because they're brilliantly produced, but the conversation that you and Jeff had.
I see what you did there.
But I feel like you will really get so much out of the show in a way that I think it is the most enjoyable I could have as a week-to-week experience. And I think that, so, as Paul said, it's different strokes, different folks. You know, I'm always going to be a binger first and foremost, but I think for those who enjoy the week-to-week, this show was perfect for it, and the casting was great about it. So the one last thing I wanted to talk about, and this is really an ethics question, I just kind of want to make this comment and then let anyone else respond if they want to, and then we can close out. I am so happy that the show existed as a meditation on grief. Like, I think we talk about consequences a lot, and in the MCU, and we have a lot of especially focused a lot on like Tony's like PTSD, or not to officially diagnose him, but like those kind of symptoms that he has.
Yeah.
We haven't really dealt much with grief and with loss. And I mean, I think we've all experienced that. I don't by any means claim to have any kind of hold on it. I know that when I've had great loss in my life, especially my mother's death, it definitely triggered some really hard things for me in terms of my own mental health journey. And the idea of the sort of like idyllic daydream, I think, is something that anyone can respond to, but especially after this last year when we've all been like, you know, trapped in this hellscape of the pandemic and politics and all the things going on. Like, I feel like there's a reason why like nostalgia television is so popular right now. And like, you know, going back to the things that we find comfort in are so popular right now. And there's just, I feel like, and I think there was actually a tweet that I saw, and I'm going to try and make sure I include in the show notes about this, that like one of the writers saying that they were very conscious of this, and they were like talking to like grief counselors about this as they wrote the show. The show is just, I feel like, such a beautiful like discussion of how we deal with grief and how some things are unhelpful and how hard closure is. And I don't know, just even though I was still like even though I was like, Wanda's a lot more of a villain than I think the show wants me to think she is, or at least it's more complicated. Once we get to the point of like her and Vision and the kids walking to the house and her getting ready to say goodbye, I mean, I was just in tears for the whole rest of the show. And it was just, even then, because it was just so well done. And I'm just so grateful that a show like this exists that was really willing to say, like, yeah, like, you don't get to just like say like, oh, that sucked, my buddy or my love got killed, let's move on to the next movie. Like, grief is a serious thing.
Yeah, for sure. And not even just for her. There were also other characters that really resonated with me right now. I mentioned it on the MCU cast a few times, and I'll mention it here. My father passed away in January. My sister passed away last February. My father passed away in January. And then my mother had a fall the same day that gave her a spinal cord injury. The two of them both had COVID, and they both one passed away, and one had serious issues. Is probably going to have lifelong reduction in her functionality of her hands and feet because of it. And it's just not only did all that loss and dealing with that loss connected with Wanda, but like the other characters, like Monica waking up in the hospital to find her mother gone, and the panic in the hospital for all of us right now going through these COVID problems. And COVID. My mother was in the hospital for COVID right after her husband died for weeks. And like, it was like 3 days before they could get her a hospital room.
Oh God.
And so like, yeah, she was in a hospital hallway for 3 days because they couldn't get her a room because of COVID. And so, it's just, and that was in the ER. So they got her in an ER room, and then they finally moved her to an actual room. And it's just like that overwhelmed hospital that Monica wakes up into, like that hit me emotionally really hard. And then later in the series, Norm wakes up for a moment and thinks about his father who's sick and how he needs to he's like, what day is it? My father's sick. I'm supposed to be taking care of him. I'm supposed to be taking these calls. I need to go. Yeah. Like there's all these characters are dealing with these serious issues with their families and grief, and like this show hit me hard in a lot of those scenes. But those are two specific. I know you're talking more specifically Wanda, but those two really got me as well.
No, I think you're right, and I should have mentioned that it's not Wanda's the central part, but obviously the grief is of all these different characters is such an important part of these things, and is one that the show really wrestles with so much.
I generally don't enjoy stories that are about grief very much. I think a lot of that is from having a lot of it as a child when, my father died when I was 8, and then family members just kept dying, and there were like very few left by the time I was like an older teenager or like 20. But and I mean, my mom actually went through a period where, my dad, her husband, died when I was 8. And then a few years later, both of her parents died. And then a few years after that, her brother and sister, her 2 siblings, died. And it really affected her life a lot, beyond just those people not being there. And it affected my life as well. And I think back, and sometimes I look and I'm like, I was kind of a dick, or like, like I was a teenage kid, and like, I think like about being insensitive in some ways, and just the way that people can, I kind of shut out some of the rest of my family, not like deliberately, not like they kept trying to contact me, but just like, I didn't really make the effort to stay in contact that much with my dad's brother. And his, his parents, and maybe part of that was sort of like not wanting to engage with all that. And the one line, the second to last episode, I really thought did a great job. I think Vision's line there is brilliant, like of a sort where it's like, isn't that in something else somewhere?
Oh, no? That grief is love persevering.
Yeah. Which, grief over the loss of loved ones is love persevering, right. I think is what's implied. Like, there's a lot of other things we can have grief over, but it's, I don't tend to enjoy stories that are focused on grief that much. And I think that's one of the reasons that I didn't enjoy WandaVision as much as some other people did. But having said that, I very much appreciate that there is a story that, you know, like, my own enjoyment notwithstanding, like, I think it was brilliantly crafted, and for a show to be there and be able to hit on all those levels and kind of give people a story that relates to their own grief, I think is really important, you know. And like, I want there to be stories for, you know, not just like all different types of people in terms of representation, but also in terms of things people go through. And so I think it's wonderful that they created something like that could resonate with people on that level.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys both. This has been it's a great way to end it. This has been a great time to really take the show and dive into the questions of it. You know, I often talk about how, for me, Civil War is far and away the best movie in the MCU just because of the questions that it raises. I think it's interesting. In some ways, I'm not sure if this is my favorite of the shows, but it certainly did raise some great questions. There's so much so much to dive into, and there's so much that I loved about it, and I'm just glad we could touch on all this and explore all this. I know both of you are great content creators in your own right. Matt, we've talked a good deal about the stuff you do, but you want to, for those folks who aren't MCU people, they come at this from the superhero ethics side. How can they find more of what you're doing these days?
Yeah, the biggest show we do is the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast. You know, we've got a ton going on this year, and we're just covering these shows week to week. Some would say over covering them. We did like an hour every Friday this last. And then we did like a 2-hour episode every Monday.
Just 3 hours for a 45-minute episode. That's a good ratio.
Yeah, and honestly, most of those episodes are like 26 minutes. And then we were like talking about them for 3 hours.
I was going to say 45 minutes is generous for the actual run times.
Listen, we have some of those beautiful navels you're ever going to find. They need to be gazed at. Like,
indeed. The good thing is, like, we've been very lucky that we've built a bit of an audience that got really involved with the WandaVision coverage, and we had a lot, and that was a lot with what Matthew was doing, was helping us wrangle all that feedback, and it just got a lot of other people in the conversation. It wasn't just me and Jeff staring at our navels, but like, or the navels of Wanda and Vision, but the entire audience got involved, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm super excited to do that with all the other shows this year, Loki particularly, which is like one more show away from me now, but like, I'm really excited about Loki.
There's going to be some ethical questions that Loki brings up that we're going to have you back on to discuss.
No.
Yeah, I think that's pretty likely. So I'm super pumped about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast, but also just strandedpanda.com. We have lots of podcasts and lots of music that's sort of geeky based. So yeah, podcast, music, strandedpanda.com. Oh, and I'm viral on TikTok now. Go check out my TikTok. Woo!
What's the handle?
Stranded Panda. At Stranded Panda on TikTok. I went viral this week. It was cool.
Yeah, check out his, check out mine as well, The Ethical Panda. We both do a lot of cool stuff on there.
Yeah, I can't wait to like respond to you and tell you how wrong you are. It's gonna be great. Have arguments on TikTok.
Wait, I just lost. We just changed to my headphones. That was okay. All good. I'll edit that out later. And Paul, what about for you? If you want to find more about what you're up to.
Yeah, I'm at Zen Madman everywhere except TikTok, which I guess I maybe will be soon, so I can tell everyone else how wrong they are.
Whatever. I'm gonna get it right now. I'm gonna camp on it.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah, and Paul, there you can find Paul's thoughts on this kind of stuff. Also, videos on chess and poker and other kind of great learning stuff. Definitely worth checking out. So, guys, thank you both so much. Just a quick shout out for anyone who is a Star Wars fan as well. This coming Sunday, March 14th, the first ever Star Wars Universe podcast trivia will happen at 3 p.m. Eastern. It's going to tie into the MCU trivia night, just in that if you are part of that league, points you get here will be a part of that. But also, if you have no idea what they're talking about there, you just want to come, show up, have fun with the trivia night. It's all going to be on Twitch. We'll read the questions, but the questions go out on text as well. You type in the question, get points for answering, points for speed. There's a great prize set up. It'll be a lot of fun, great time to just hang out with a bunch of Star Wars geeks and have a good time. And the focus will be the movie The Force Awakens. So check out all that. Check out all the great ways you can get back to us. If you're interested in continuing the conversation, you can find me on Facebook or Twitter under the Ethical Panda. On Twitter, it's actually Ethical Panda 77. But you can also go to strandedpanda.com and look for Matthew Fox or this podcast name, Superhero Ethics. Email, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your comments, love to hear your thoughts. So many great ethical questions were started on WandaVision. Would love to get your thoughts on it. So, Paul, Matt, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you to everybody for listening. Have a great day.